All
right,
Who are you?
here we go.
Who are you? What's
Who
your
am
name?
I? So my name is Tokunbo Olajide, and I am the proud son of Michael Olajide Sr., who was a Nigerian. I was born in Vancouver, Canada, but I've been living in New York for most of my life. My story is I was a former well-ranked professional boxer, did that for many years, kind of moved on from that and worked in hospitality in like kind of like New York residential, like high-end New York residential sorts of buildings. And I'm also very happy to be a babalawo, so an Ifa priest, and an Ifa devotee for about 25 years now. So that's a little bit of where I started at.
Okay. Okay. Um, Tell me about your childhood. You said in Toronto, Canada?
No, no, I'm from the other coast. I'm from Vancouver, Canada.
Vancouver. Okay.
Yeah. So Vancouver's a beautiful city. And it was like my childhood was like tranquil. Like my dad was a weekend dad, and my dad was like heroic for me.
Hmm.
So it was definitely like a little bit living in two worlds because I lived in a place called Richmond, and then my dad lived in actual like Vancouver. So when I see my dad on the weekends, it was just like fantastic scene. My dad trained boxers, my brother, and he had a whole like stable of boxers as well. So our first stop would always be the boxing gym on Friday nights. And I would like just jump right into it, throw gloves on, get to it. I was always around boxing since I was like, as long as I can remember. And I could always just, take to it and do it. I never really learned to box. I just kind of emulated what I saw around me. And then, Saturdays, the next morning, like, we would go to, my dad would drive all his boxers to the beach. They would jog, hot chocolate, come back. I'd watch them. And then we'd watch fights. Like, there used to be fights on every weekend. We'd watch that. It was a fantastic time. My favorite meal as a kid was a Nigerian dish that my father would prepare called fufu, which is essentially it's rice flour made into a paste, and he would make it with like a tomato sauce with like oxtail and like okra, onions, and it was fantastic. So it was just like a little slice of heaven every weekend. So my dad was certainly, you know, heroic in my early life, and he's always been a guiding light throughout my life. Even through like some turbulence, my dad has always been that's my guy. That's my
Hmm.
guy. I love my pop. My father is in Ibaye in heaven now. He passed away for over 10 years now, but love my dad dearly. I miss him. He talks. He visits me. It's crazy. I got a story about that. But yeah, very much a force in my life still. Yeah,
I would ask you about something else, but like you have a story
please.
about that, so let me know.
Oh man. Well, my father was like the general, and I was like, like the highest ranking member of my father's army, so to speak. And when I was a kid, my father and I were like father and son, brothers in arms, comrades, and best friends, And, whatever my father said, I carried it out like to the letter. And I think by the time I was 20 years old or so, we kind of started to clash a little bit because I would say that I was like, listen, you've laid out the rules, so these are the rules. You can't change them now. I'm playing by the rules. You got to abide by what you say. Some of the things he would kind of like, you know, shuck on a little bit, and I didn't agree. I was like, listen, I've been listening to you for 20 years. It's different now. So at a certain part, like like we were estranged, and so I would try multiple times to like kind of just like be around my dad, and in later parts of my dad's life, he changed a little bit. He had like like some health issues, so he wasn't really the same physical sort of presence and force that he'd always been. But at the end of my father's life, what made me feel very sad was that I thought that whatever possibilities, as far as what could be, as far as the type of connection that we would have in my adult life, that it was over.
Mhm.
And I was just like, you know, we just had like like the promise of what could have been, all the things that were, but I felt like there were things that were left undone. So it was difficult. It was painful for me. And one day I was in my apartment and I was laying on the couch, and at the end of my couch there was my desk, and I had an iMac, and I was watching a documentary about This was the time of like Boko Haram, and like Boko Haram was like, like just creating havoc in northern Nigeria. And they were interviewing this man who, he didn't look like my father at all, because like northern Nigerians, they look different. They have finer features, they're darker skinned. They don't look like, my father's like southwestern Nigeria, so they look very different. My father's more robust, big head, big face, muscular. But there was something really uncanny about this dude. It just reminded me so much of my dad. And it was like literally something dragged me to sleep. Like I went right to sleep. And no sooner that I went to sleep is that I woke up, but in another realm. But it was it was my apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was like my couch, which I'm sleeping on, and then like the desk over here, and then over here was like my dining room table, and on this side of my dining room table is where I would do readings for people, and on the other side was my altar where my dad is the centerpiece. And when I look over there, who's sitting on the floor on a mat dressed like a babalawo but my father, in his best physical shape that I remember him, and his demeanor was like very tranquil, and he was doing something with his hands that, I won't say what it was, but that's what babalawos do. And I remember just looking at him, and we were talking, and I was asking him things, and I said to him, my father left Nigeria in 1957. He never went back. And I was asking him, I was like, Dad, I said, Baba, I said, wouldn't it be crazy if we went back to Nigeria after all these years?
Mm-hmm.
And he smiled. And he was telling me things. And I said, Baba, how come you never told me these things before now? And he just laughed. And I got choked up, and he came over to me, and he pulled my head to his chest, and I cried. I woke up, cried like a baby, because it wasn't a dream. It was a visit, And for anyone who doesn't believe in, afterlife or what happens later, I can't convince you. It's for you to experience. But when you've been touched by beyond, you'll know that it's real. The thing that was so poignant about it all was that the things that my father told me about in the dream, I went and found out about those things. And now I listened to my father for more than 20 years, and he never told me about that. But in that dream, he told me about things that were real. I don't know how you explain that.
Ask.
That's a visit. That's a visit. That's a visit. And there have been many other times when my father has let me know what's what, from the other side. And, like I said, for anyone who doesn't believe in those types of things, it's not for me to convince you. When you experience something, then you can debate it with yourself and you can try to reconcile it in whatever way you choose to, if you don't want to believe it. But it's just a beautiful thing to know that. So, I've told people in the years since that, when someone passes away, it is difficult, but it's a change of state that I would say mirrors the change of state from puberty to adulthood. It's just a stage, but it's not the end. And if you could, in the same way that it's like, if there was ever a baby that you knew someone as a baby, well, you don't carry them like a baby when they're a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're a teenager, you treat them in a different way. And then when they become adult, you treat them another way. And, so like the stages of life call for different things. And same thing, like, the stages of creation call for different things. And the establishment of connection, or the maintenance of connection with people, or the elevation even of connection with people, is not in any way prohibited by them going to what we call Ibaye, heaven. It's a beautiful continuation. And I tell people, like when people lose someone, I said, listen, you feel sad for the loss, but know also that in Ibaye, in heaven, it's a family reunion. And that, everybody from your line is celebrating the homecoming of who you lost. And it's not over because you'll see them again. So it's beautiful. And it's for me, it's like very moving. I love my pop and I miss him. So, but I know that it's not over and that he's always with me. And the last thing I'll say about it is that, people have said to me, like they feel like very sad. They feel very sad, like, at particular times. And I said, feelings don't tell you the whole story, because I know from personal experience is that sometimes when something, it's almost like when something particularly poignant happens and it reminds you of that person and you really feel something and you feel like tremendous sadness. I can think of one person in particular. I told her, I says, don't be sad. What you feel is their presence. And, like in our limited view of what happens, we only have like these limited ways of seeing and understanding things. But like, for example, that is their presence. Rejoice in that. Be happy in that. Talk to them and tell them, hey, I know that you're here and thank you for coming to pay me a visit. Because that's a beautiful part of our lives, to let you know that our loved ones still with us always, no matter what. To keep elevating them and propitiate them, and that connection will only be made stronger.
Wow. Okay. What is that other world? I don't even know like what question I ask. Like, what is that?
So when you say,
where is that?
Where is that?
Yeah.
So Ibaye would be the final meeting place, as far as we know on this side, of Egun. And Egun is the collective, the entity of all of our departed, whether they be blood ancestors or people who we knew. It's heaven, And there's a very interesting story that says that, that throughout your life, hopefully you do your very best. And that when it's all done, you will go and sit before celestial court. And in celestial court, you'll sit before Olodumare, the creator of all things, and the council of Egun, right? Meaning all of your ancestors. And there, it'll be determined if you've done well in life or if you've done poorly. So it is celestial court, but you don't get to say a word. You don't get to explain anything that you did. There's only one witness who gets called forth. And that witness is what's called OGG. And OGG is the shadow. And the shadow was sent to you, by the creator to accompany you all through life. And every single thing that you've done, OGG was right there and recorded it all. So when it's played back, it's all right there. And if you've done well, fantastic, beautiful. Move on to the next stage of creation. If you haven't, get to the back of the line. And my late, great godfather, Julito Collazo, a fantastic Babalao, an old school Cuban, full of character, full of charisma, full of charm. He used to love to say he'd be sitting there with a cigarette. And he had a way about him. He would say anything on his mind. I mean, an absolute non-conformist. Oh, he didn't care. That's the truth. He would sit. That's all he said. And he would say, "You have to learn how to live. If not, die. Come back, try again." He just say it all the time. Uh-huh. And I know we didn't make it up. It really is true. It really is true. I can tell you another story that somebody told me once. It's a person who was involved in Ifa research. He asked his godfather. He says, "Why do people act so badly?" And he says, "Well, you believe in reincarnation, don't you?" And he was like, "Well, yeah." And he says, "Well, you can tell by the way a lot of these people acted. They used to be animals. That's what you're seeing now." So yeah, there are many, there are just so many. And for me, this is the richness of Ifa and what took me towards the path of Ifa. Because what Ifa does is it explains the things that are otherwise very mysterious. And for the things that we can understand, beautiful. Ifa allows us that understanding. It facilitates that understanding. And then for the things that we don't understand yet, acceptance works just as well sometimes. Just accept that's the way that it is. I'll tell you something that I often tell people is that if people come and say, "Well, why does this person keep doing this?" Or, so you have to understand that a person is a particular shape, right? And you see them as their physical shape, but you don't see their constitution. You don't see the instrument that is that encapsulates their being. I said to them, I said, "Have you ever watched a Nat Geo show?" And they'll say, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, have you ever seen an antelope go over to a crocodile and say, excuse me, Mr. Alligator, why do you keep eating my children?" Alligator said, "What?
Young.
I'll eat you too." That's just how some things are. Like that's that thing playing its position in the world. So, it's like we don't get to design how things go, but we do get to recognize how they operate and navigate the course around that, you know? So that's just like, for me, that's just like the whole idealism thing. And I was like a big idealist for, a lot of my life. And it's something that we need to root out because it's like, idealism, as far as I'm concerned, is like Santa Claus for adults. It's this long series of things that you assume are true when nobody told you that. It's written nowhere. They're just lies that you made up because that's what you'd like to believe. And it becomes very painful for us to see when it's like, no, that's not how life works. You know, so idealism gotta go.
So reincarnation is part of the Yoruba cosmology. Is that correct? Like, how does that work?
Well, I've never been on that side.
Uh-huh.
I can only tell you the things that I've read and the stories that I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way that I could explain it would be learn how to live. If not, you can die, come back and try again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easiest way that I could explain it.
What is, you said when we stand in the
Before
before the
council
council
of Egun.
and our shadow speaks for us,
Mm-hmm.
if we lived right or not, like
If we've done well,
if we've done
or if
well,
we've done poorly.
what is doing well in life,
Well,
what is doing poorly in life.
I mean, there are some pretty simple things, right? Like there's the 16 mandates of Ifa, and it's a delineation of rules to live by, not to call one thing another, not to lead people down the wrong path, not to take a blind man's cane, to treat people respectfully, to respect the hierarchies of Ifa, you know? So there are all these parameters that we're given to live life the right way. Most simply is to do good, not evil, to contribute to the world being a little bit better by whatever means that you can. So it's really about there's a saying that I love, and it says that a man's driving passion without fail subdues his free will. Well, you know that one, nice. And essentially, it's just about what have you done here? And I think that, learning what your destiny says is just a fantastic set of guardrails to keep the ball in play, to keep you walking on what Ifa calls the true path. Because Ifa says that the true path is narrow and it has very few travelers, but the path of the wicked path is very broad and it's densely populated. So, to do well, I would say, would be to complete your mandate here in this world, to fulfill and complete the destiny that you chose in heaven before you came to the world.
How does that go? Choosing your destiny before you come into the world. Like, can you tell me more about that?
Well, the first part of it is that, Ifa says that we choose a destiny in heaven, and that, when we pass through the birth canal of our mothers, our memory of heaven is washed away. And that part of our mission here in the world is to rediscover what that destiny is and to fulfill it. There are stories that speak about the choosing of an Ori, the choosing of a, meaning a head, the choosing of a destiny. Essentially, what it comes down, Ori being the force of nature that was a part of you before your beginning and will be the essence of you after your end. And, there are many stories. I could tell a story about an Ifa story about that. When the spirit of Mother Earth was in heaven, before she came down to take her place on Earth, she was told to perform sacrifice, right? So that things would be smooth for her on Earth, and so that no one would land on top of her. She says, "I'm Mother Earth. Who dared tread on me? No need." So she went down to Earth and took her place. And then soon, the esteta, the mat, that is the bed and the table of the Orishas was in heaven and was going to come down to Earth, and was told so that nothing would land on top of them. They should do ebo, perform sacrifice. Said, "I'm going to take my place with Mother Earth. I'll be just fine." Okay, went down, spread out on top of Mother Earth. Next, the stool in heaven was told, perform sacrifice so that nothing heavy may land on top of you. No, no such thing will happen. I'll be fine. Okay. Stool goes down to earth on top of the estera, the prayer mat. Next, who will be the king is in heaven. He says, listen, they said, listen, before you go to earth, perform sacrifice so that nothing heavy lands on top of you. He says, I will take my place as the rightful king. Nothing dare land on top of me. He went down, took his place on the stool. Next, the crown. Before going to earth, perform sacrifice so that nothing heavy lands on top of you. He says, I will take my seat on the head of the king. Nothing dare land on top of me. The king is crowned on earth. Heavy is the head of he who wears the crown.
Mm-hmm.
Next, the Ikodie, the red lorry feather, was in heaven, was told, before you go down to earth, make sacrifice so that nothing happens to you, nothing lands on top of you. He says, I will sit atop the crown of the king. There are no greater heights. 16 lorry feathers were put around the king of the crown. Lastly, the fly was in heaven. The fly was told, before you go down, take a look. Mother Earth, the estera, the mat, the stool, the king, the crown, the Ikodie. None of them did Ifa. Sorry, none of them performed sacrifice, and something landed on top of all of them. Learn from these examples. And the fly performed sacrifice. And so the fly went and took his seat on the tip top of the crown of on top of the Ikodie. And that that it says that so long as the fly never congregates in a multitude in the wrong place, they will always be fine. And that even when the king eats, the fly will have his portion. So why people choose what they choose, I don't really know that it matters, because for all intents and purposes, when you get to earth, you've chosen. As far as when people have children, I always tell them the best time for you to do works for your child is before conception, so that to contribute to that child making a good choice in heaven for what they choose, to have good health, to choose a good destiny. And then also, during pregnancy, and then of course, when the child is actually born. So these are the types of things that are done to help smoothen what is a difficult path, because, life, one thing that unites us all in life is that life is difficult. There will be difficulties to overcome. Ifa says that, even if you do all of the things that make the Orishas happy, at all times, you will not be spared difficulty in life, because, the difficulty of life is the resistance training that contributes to building good character over time. There's no hack for that.
What constitutes good character?
Well, the Yoruba Ifa concept of good character is what's called Iwa Pele. And what it essentially says is gentle character, the development of good character, right? The easiest way that I can explain it is to be meek. And to not,
What's that?
meek would be the opposite of very prideful. A mouse is meek because it's small. It doesn't take up a lot of room. So it's that, that we should do our best to be meek. And, that Ifa says that, lower your head, for pride is an evil thing. And I guess the easiest way that I would explain it would be to say that to never be a coward, but almost live as if you were one. Not to be boastful, to be humble. Because what humility allows you to see is, like what one man really is, what one woman really is. As great as you may think you are still one person, one being, made the same as everyone else, walking the same plane as everyone else. And when your time is done, the same thing that happens to everybody else will happen to you too. And then if you live on, you will live on through the good that you do. So, I would say, but humility is like, I would say one of the number one pillars of what it is to have gentle character. To never overestimate who you are nor what you are.
How does one, like, I'm a rather ambitious person. How do I reconcile humility with having like Is it not humble to have big dreams for oneself?
Not at all. I don't see any contradiction between having aspirations that you're prepared to work for. I think what humility tends to do is I think humility tends to draw other people towards what you're doing. It certainly can. I mean, certainly there are a lot of people who are quite the opposite and are attention seeking, who are able to draw people to them. But Ifa says that what starts wrong ends wrong. And if you've had things come to you under unfortunate means, by unfortunate means, you can expect that eventually the result will be bad. And there are plenty of examples of people who rise very high in the most unfortunate way and then find themselves multitudes lower than that level before their end comes. I don't even need to say any names, but there are plenty of people who we see all the time who raise to great heights, and then of course they crash. You know. So as far as having big dreams, I think it's fantastic. I think that what is the best use of the talents that a person has, those things should be executed. A person should do everything that they can to reach those things. Now, of course, it should be like, analyze what you want, analyze why you want it, why you want that. Is it sustainable? Will you enjoy who you will become in doing that? Because in reaching any goal, there is what you're going to have to forfeit to have that. And, I know from personal experience, there are some deals that are not worth making. And there are some people who make the deal before they even realize what the deal constitutes. And, when you make some deals, there's no reneging on them. You will have to pay, you will have to pay what you signed up for.